We are live. Welcome to another episode of the BCTL Podcast. This is your host, Emil Fisher. Today, I'm honored to have an esteemed guest. I've got Ulises. Is it pronounced Bella or Bella?
Yeah, it's Bella, but
Bella?
Bella's cool. I can live with Bella.
I mean, I want to pronounce people's names correctly. Everybody butchers my name all the time. So I like to make sure that I pronounce other people's names correctly. So
No,
anyway,
Bella's
Ulysses
cool,
is
man.
in a band called Ozomatli. You're one of the founding members, right?
Yes.
So Ozomatli is a kind of like a Latin fusion, Latin rock band that has won several Grammys, like at least two, right?
Yeah, we have 2 Grammys, and we also have one Latin Grammy.
What is a Latin Grammy?
uh, the Latin Grammys, I guess, separated. I don't know what year it was, because there's so much music going on. You know, from Mexico down, South America is just like every other country in itself has so much different kind of musical varieties, I think, and styles. So I think I don't know who the hell thought about it, but they invented the Latin Grammys, and we ended up getting one of those too.
So what is the process of submitting yourself and getting to that point? Because that's a pretty high accolade. Like, how does one win a Grammy? Like, how does that sort of thing even happen for a band?
Um, Honestly, the thing with the Grammys is that it's very like the people who vote on it are the people who are in the music industry, right? And so it's not necessarily a popularity contest in the sense of like who has the most sales or who's the most popular. It's kind of like, does the scene dig you or not, you know? And when we first got nominated, we were actually going to go on the road the very next day. So none of us were really going to even go to the event. And we thought it was a wash. We thought we were going to lose. And what ended up happening is our manager fucking had a shit fit. Can I curse on this? I'm sorry.
Hey, it's uncensored. Go ahead.
Okay, so our manager had a shit fit, and then um, um, basically told us like, you guys gotta go. You're nominated. Like, even this alone, it might be the only time you ever do it. Da, da, da. So we rallied the band, and the band ended up going, and we actually ended up winning that year. And it was for our second album called Embrace the Chaos that unfortunately enough was released on 9/11. So commercially it tanked, but critically it got a lot of love.
Now, your band has had. I mean, I consider your band to be like one of the bigger bands in that literally you have a lot of members. You have a lot of different musicians and different instruments. How many instruments do you play for Ozomatli?
Well, my whole thing is that I've always been kind of a multi-instrumentalist since
Yeah.
I was a kid. You know, I started on classical piano, and because my dad was a classical violinist, and he always of course, every kid always just wants to play the electric guitar, and that was my initial want, and you know, I wanted to do that first. And what ended up happening is my dad, in his wisdom, was like, "Yo, you should start on piano. It's the base. It's the best route for everything you ever want to learn." And like, I took like 15, 16 years of classical piano lessons. And then from classical piano, I went to clarinet. And then the obvious next step from clarinet was saxophone. And it was around maybe like junior high, late junior high, early high school that I started to get into like punk rock a lot and stuff like that. And I started picking up the guitar and the bass. And it was weird because I almost wanted the guitar and the bass to not be scholastic, to not be kind of like, I didn't want to take lessons on that thing. I just kind of wanted to figure it out and play the songs I liked. So that kind of gave me the whole kind of basis of being a multi-instrumentalist. And in some ways, you know, as a member in a band, it's come in handy for the band, just trying to be able, because not every song needs saxophone, not every song needs this or that. So trying to find a place in the song.
So we got a very silly question here. I'm just going to answer it because it's the only question that we have on here. It's a
Okay.
question from Richard Story. Richard is asking, in a 1-on-2 tag team match, you and Ulises versus John Gunther, who would win and how would victory be achieved? Richard, I can beat up John Gunther fairly easily. Ulises is a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt and not a physically small man. So I think that Gunther would be fucked if it were both of us. I'm
I
just saying.
honestly, my jiu-jitsu's for shit. I haven't been able to train. I don't even know how to answer that.
Listen, I know that I can break Gunther's legs, and I know that I've already performed surgery on him in a parking lot. So he'd be in a rough spot, man. He'd be in a really rough spot.
Yeah.
So Ulises, I know that we talked about this in the Jiu-Jitsu Times interview that we did a while back, but I want to just kind of bring it back up for anybody watching, anybody interested. How did you get into Gracie Jiu-Jitsu?
Okay, so it was already around the time that we were recording the second record. It was 2001-ish. And obviously the whole UFC thing had already happened. And, jiu-jitsu was already kind of starting to kind of get that what is this? What is that about? And I was hanging out with, I don't know if you know this hip hop group called Dilated Peoples. And both of those guys, Evidence and Raka, trained, but Raka was the guy who had started it first. And for whatever reason, I just felt like I wanted to learn something new in my life. I had taken some martial arts as a kid before, but it wasn't like serious, and it was kind of more catching on what was popular at the time, and Raka suggested Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and he's like, and I was like, what? You train with those dudes? Like what? Like I had this crazy perception that like I couldn't even hang. I couldn't even fuck with that, And he's like, dude, just go. They give you the first lesson for free, and and they always get you with the first lesson thing. Everybody, all the jiu-jitsu schools, And I started, at first I was gonna not go, and I started thinking about it, and I was like, even if I don't end up doing jujitsu, like saying no to a jujitsu lesson from one of the family was like almost the equivalent. It's like if fucking Jimi Hendrix came up to you and was like, "Hey, can I give you a guitar lesson?" You were like, "No." It's like, dude, just take the fucking lesson, right? Like, take the knowledge and see how it works, or whatever. What's the magic? And sure enough, that's exactly the thing, is that when you first get introduced to jiu-jitsu, it honestly feels like magic. It feels like what the science of the leverage and the things that they first teach you and all this stuff. It stimulated a certain part of me intellectually too, that it made me realize that this isn't just like a tough guy's thing. It could be for everybody. And the way I guess Elio had designed it was for exactly for that. So after training with a guy who was under Hoist there for a long, because when I started taking lessons there, Hoist Gracie was still teaching the group classes, man. And so I got to jump in a couple group classes there, and I got to train with pretty much everybody there at one point or another from 2001 to this point. But my main instructor and the main guy that I train with there now is a guy named Alex Stewart, another black belt. And yeah, I miss training. I miss rolling like a motherfucker. But that's what initially got me into jiu-jitsu.
So when you're on the road, do you get to train much?
It's rare because number one, I have to know that there's a good place to train. Usually I try to plan that ahead. And I usually train in the gi, and the gi takes up a lot of space. So if I don't know for sure if I'm going to train, I don't usually take it,
Why don't you like no gi?
I do like no gi, but there's something about the gi that I like it. I do like no gi, especially in the summer. And I like the way the game is fast, but there's something old man about old manish about like the gi and just the way like I can play the game I like to play. So that's usually a thing. And I find the options with the gi itself, using the gi itself, really pleasurable. Like, figuring out ways to grab the gi, use the gi itself for chokes and cranks and whatever's.
Has jujitsu affected your writing process? Have you changed anything about the way that you do music as a result of training jujitsu?
Um, as far as just the one thing I will give to the family, I mean, the one thing for sure I will give to the family as far as the Gracie clan is concerned, is the mythology and the way they taught the jujitsu, the progression of the techniques and the way they presented it. And that really stimulated the way, even in music. And I know that there's this other cat had talked about it too, this drummer, Brendan Buckley. I think you talked to him before. He's the drummer for Shakira. I think he's a purple belt or a brown belt too. But he was correlating the way teaching jiu-jitsu is very similar in the way teaching music in a proper way. So I guess it kind of, if anything, it reinforced a proper way of trying to learn things, a proper way of trying to practice things, and then applying the things. I think that's what it kind of reinforced, if anything.
Yeah, man. So I got a question for you. When a band wins a Grammy, where is the Grammy kept?
It really depends on the guy. For me, I have them over, I have them like, those are pretty much the one of the few trophies I have. So I have them over on my mantle, but some guys have them in their studios. Some guys, one guy gave his away to his mom because I guess, she was always kind of enamored by the Grammy thing. And it kind of depends. The thing is, Emil, is pretty kind of funny, is that you don't technically own the Grammy. Like, let's say I was really hard up for some like crack money and I needed some real bad and I wanted to sell the Grammy. Like, like it's supposedly illegal to like sell it. Like they're only on loan to you. You know what I mean?
That's weird. Has anyone ever had a Grammy taken away from them for some reason?
I think the only Grammy that was officially taken away was the Milli Vanilli Grammy. I don't know if you remember that whole story. Is that Milli Vanilli was this group that they came to be found out that they were lip syncing the whole tracks and they never really were on the music. So that was the one time I think the Grammys as an entity took back a Grammy. And it's actually at the museum. It's all like broken and in pieces.
Interesting. Did they break it?
I don't know if they broke it or the Academy broke it, but the shit's in pieces and it's pretty funny. And the thing is with Milli Vanilli is that they were a design band. I don't know if you know this. There was this 70s disco group called Boney M. They had some big hits with Rasputin and By the Rivers of Babylon. They were kind of like a disco group. The same German producer that had basically made that band was the same guy behind The Wizard of Oz, behind Milli Vanilli.
Okay. Now, you listen to a pretty diverse, eclectic type of music. I know that you dabble in some Slayer. What are some of your favorite bands to listen to these days?
On the heavy tip, kind of on more
Just
on the
in
heavy
general.
tip, or just
In
in
general, like
general.
what do you listen? What is in your Spotify playlist right now? Like, what have you been jamming to?
Well, honestly, I don't even fuck with Spotify just because I like buying music because I
Okay.
feel like it's the one thing that like I'm keeping the boat of the music industry, like it's already halfway in the water, but I feel like buying music is like a way of giving back to the artists I've always loved. But let's see. Music wise, I'm right now I've been doing this 420 quarantine dub session. So I've been doing a lot of dub reggae from the 60s and 70s and early 80s. Um, uh, I got through a kick where, yeah, I'll go through heavy kicks where certain bands I'll just start really getting into it back again. Old albums like Celtic Frost, I was getting into that again. I was getting into Hellhammer again. Um, just I'm into all kinds of music, and there's very few musics where I'm like, I don't want even a piece of that. But like, I try to. The beauty of music is that as much as you studied, it's kind of like jujitsu. As much as you studied and been around it, there'll always be something new to learn, and there'll always be a new scene and new something being created. And that's one of the things for me. Just recently with the passing of Florian, I was listening to a lot of Kraftwerk, Betty Wright, man, jazz, a lot of jazz. Always constantly listening to a lot of jazz, from Miles Davis to John Coltrane, Sonny Rollins, a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that, it's funny. People always say, "Oh yeah, I listen to all music. I like all music," and then you throw a band name out there and like, "What's that?" And then you tell them, and you put it on, they're like, "Oh no, not that. That's terrible." I appreciate when somebody legitimately likes all music, and it sounds like you're that kind of guy.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's the other thing though. It's like, even if you try to, there maybe might some things that I'm not as into as other things. Like, for example, in metal, like there's all kinds of metal I like, and then but like, let's say just a scene like black metal. Like, I don't dig every black metal band, but there are black metal bands I dig, and I don't dig every thrash band, but of course there's thrash bands that were monumentally influential for me at the same time, whether it's Suicidal Tendencies, which is more punk thrash, but like, of course, like the big three, Slayer, Metallica, fucking Testament, Exodus, all that stuff.
That's awesome, man. So your band has featured a lot of different musicians over the course of its existence thus far. Do you think that like the fact that you guys have gone through different eras but still maintain a fairly signature sound, like when you hear Ozomatli come on, you know that it's Ozomatli. How have you kind of constructed that? How has that been? How have you done that?
Well, I think the initial chemistry is the members of the band. When we first started, it was very eclectic. We had Cut Chemist on the turntables with Charlie Tune on the rap. We had Jiro playing Indian classical tabla, full piece horn section. All kinds of influences were happening at the moment, and we're taking cues from James Brown, taking cues from like the New Yorican salsa scene, the Fania stuff, taking cues from people like Bob Marley, and the initial chemistry, I think, had to do with the members and the city that we grew up in, because all of us, me in particular, I was bused as a kid, so I got to, because I was bused from my neighborhood to all the way on the other side of the city, I got to like experience a slice of all kinds of strata of class in the city. Like, my bus went through South Central and Koreatown and all these hood ass areas, but yet my school, I remember, like, in my class, the daughter of the DA of Los Angeles was in my class, so it was like interesting to get out of that. And from that experience, all of a sudden, I got to hear all the music that everybody was going through during that time. And then from that point on, I just got super into music, and I got super into all kinds of different music,
Yeah, I mean, having that sort of experience. And what nationality is your family?
So my dad is from Spain. He was born in Barcelona, but he grew up in the northern Spain, right next to the Basque Country, in a state called Navarra. And then he immigrated. He actually was more of a refugee because post Civil War Spain was really rough with the dictatorship, and he ended up going to France, then going to Italy, and then ended up in Canada. So I have family in Canada and in Spain, and then my mother is from Mexico City, so she came up here, and they both met here in LA.
We got another question from Richard Story. This one's actually a good question. The other one sucked, Richard. How old is Ulises, and how does he stay in jujitsu shape, and how does he stay in music shape?
Well, I'm 45 years old, and I stay in music shape by practicing my horn, by practicing my playing music every day. Um, there's certain fundamentals that I try to do every day, whether it's etudes, scales, exercises, patterns, to keep the fingers going. That was one of the things that also appealed to me about jujitsu, is that I didn't have to hit anything too hard, because my hands were like my hands are my business, right? And that's why whenever I roll with somebody, I'm always like, "Are you one of those wrist lock guys?" Like, just off the bat, I have to ask you, man. Just chill out on me with that. But um, as far as jujitsu is concerned, that's hard to gauge, honestly, because I just been trying to maintain a basic kind of workout here at the house in my backyard. I do have a jujitsu dummy and some mats at home here, because we've had this little kind of like social club that we've been doing here at my house for a while. It's already been about 6 years. We call it the Ghetto Dojo, and we've always kind of had different people come through and train here. So thankfully, I do have mats, and I do have a jujitsu dummy to just kind of like work on things. But I mean, I'm sure, as all you know, and all of you guys who have trained, that's only fun for a certain amount of time. After a certain point, you're like, like you really want the real thing. But that's how I've kind of been able to somewhat maintain.
Awesome, man. Now, have you been using this downtime? I'm assuming that you're fairly locked in because of the COVIDs. Have you been using it for anything in particular? Have you been doing anything different?
For sure. I mean, as far as, here's the thing with the whole COVID thing, is that as a musician, there was a moment where you could make money off of selling your music, and it came to a point where it was all about playing live, and the one thing, the 98% thing that put, you know, money on the table is gone. So us as a band has been trying to figure out ways to think out of the box, to try to maintain some sort of exposure with our fans and our audience. So what we've kind of gone into is the whole streaming thing, streaming concerts, and we've already done two of them. We did a Cinco de Mayo one not too long ago, and the running joke was that, like, with or without a pandemic, Ozomatli was going to work Cinco de Mayo. God damn it, you know. It's kind of like a florist not working for St. Valentine's. We had to work that day, and we did a streaming show. We're thinking of more of them. And personally, though, the one thing that I just do is try to establish a routine, and not waste the day completely. It's so easy to just like veg out on the couch and not do shit. I try to do all kinds of things up until 5 o'clock, and then I kind of give my space to veg out.
Do you teach at all? Do you teach any music?
Not really. The thing is that most of my colleagues and most of the scene kind of jumped on that train. Like, I'm gonna start finding students to like teach online, and I felt like I was just competing with the world with that. And I don't know, it just, I didn't feel like busting, going crazy over $30-$40, man.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know, like it's one of those things. Do you like to teach music? Is it something that you like to do?
I do. And the thing is with me, though, is that the couple times where I've actually taught music, I found myself being attached to the outcome of the student more than to my own profit. You know, like if the kid didn't have enough money for the lesson, I was just like, I didn't give a fuck. I was just like, well, let's just learn. Let's go. Let's do, what was the lesson plan? What did you practice? And I feel like almost like I was really into their progression. And if they stopped or quit, I almost felt too emotionally invested in it, as far as like teaching is concerned. So it's been a while since I've taught music, but as far as like a formal kind of like have students, but it hasn't been that long where I've done like workshops and hooked up with kids, did master classes is what they call them, where you have like 4 or 5 kids and you kind of break down things for them.
That's awesome, man. Do you find that teaching music affects how you teach jujitsu? I know that you said
Again,
that.
yeah.
I know that you said like the Gracie mythology, the way the Gracie family teaches has affected how you teach music, but do you find that it goes the other way too?
Yes, because the one thing with music that even when I first started in jiu-jitsu, it's like, dude, I was never going to be a competitor. I knew I was not going to be like the dopest motherfucker in jiu-jitsu. I didn't have like these illusions of grandeur, like thinking like this or that. I decided I knew that I had to take jiu-jitsu in a way where it was all about just my own progression and how good can I get as an individual. And in some ways it's kind of the same with saxophone. I'm not gonna get any better than John Coltrane. I'm not gonna be as influential as like Wayne Shorter or somebody like that, but I can establish my own voice, my own style, and have fun with it, which is really the big thing with me with jiu-jitsu is that I've always had a lot of fun with it, and I've always liked the people I've met doing it. And I'm the kind of guy who loves to joke around while we're rolling. Sure, sometimes rolls will get intense and people nut up and get a little aggro or whatever, but I'm kind of like one of those persons who really likes to have fun while I roll.
That's awesome. Before the pandemic and then after the pandemic, is there anything that you're working on? Anything new you're playing with on the mat?
On the mat, for me, it was just more the continuation of just kind of like the cool thing about my little social club is that everybody trains in different places. So I have guys that are checkmat guys. I have guys who've come here that are Gracie Baja guys. I've had guys from all kinds of different schools. And the one cool thing is that there would always be, or like I have another guy who's like a Danaher like fanatic who buys all the DVDs. You know what I mean? That guy. And the one cool thing about it is that every time I train with this group of guys, there's always somebody that wants to share a new technique or share something that they're doing at their school. So it gives me the kind of like, oh, so that's kind of like the trendy thing over there. Oh, that's what's going on over there. Okay, this is what's going on over here. And then you go to places like Combat Base where it's like, man, there's just nothing but sharks over there too. And I always end up learning something over there,
Yeah, Chris Howder's a fantastic instructor.
Yeah.
Who are you learning from these days? I know you just said Chris Howder at Combat Base, but are there other gyms that you're going to?
Well, my main guy is Alex Stewart. He's my main instructor who I kind of like roll with from kind of an instructional kind of vibe where he's kind of breaking me down. And besides that guy, pretty much, yeah, the guys that I kind of roll with who are most of them are all other black belts and brown belts. So I got a buddy named Alan, the checkmat guy. I got a buddy, Steve, who's a brown belt out from Covina. I forgot the school he's in, but There's been plenty of times where I've gotten to roll with like some heavy duty. Like I got to one time there was an artist roll at Orlando Sanchez's spot where all these artists who roll and musicians who roll came down, and we all got to get steamrolled by Orlando. And but yeah, the Alex Stewart's kind of my main guy who I've kind of been as far as like instructional.
That's awesome, man. Now you said that you went to this artist role. I'm assuming that you've been to other things of that sort. Have you met anybody and found out they trained and were like, "Holy shit, you train?"
Yeah. Let's see. Well, Brendan Buckley was one guy, the drummer for Shakira. When on the first time I found out he trained, I was like, "Whoa, you trained, dude!" And of course, being from the Gracie Academy, our boy Al Bundy, he was one of the first guys. He was one of the first guys that I was like, "Oh shit, he trains! Oh goodness!" And recently, who else has been around that I've caught in the locker room? Vince Vaughn. He started training over there too.
Is he? He seems like he'd be a spider guard guy.
I've never seen him roll, but and from what I remember, he just got his blue belt. I'm not sure though. Another guy who rolls over there is Billy from Biohazard. I've gotten to roll with him. He's a tough motherfucker.
Well, yeah, he's a black belt. He's a long time black belt, isn't he?
Yeah, him too, man.
So, speaking of Vince Vaughn and others, like kind of, I consider Vince Vaughn to be kind of like an A-lister in the shit that he's been in. What do you think of people that train jiu-jitsu but don't roll and that get promoted by their instructors? Like you see that a lot with certain instructors in LA.
I know that's a pretty controversial thing. I am of the school that jiu-jitsu, again, a correlation to music, is that if we're jamming jazz and if we're jamming a blues, it's going to be really fucking obvious whether or not you have your shit together and you know what you're doing. And I see jiu-jitsu the same way, I find it hard to believe that anyone can progress in this art without rolling. I don't know, or maybe you could just get up to, maybe your first blue belt, but after that, it's like, if you're not really sparring with people with that energy and that resistance, I don't know how you can get good at it. Honestly, it's like you got to get dirty. You got to get your ass handed to you 1,001 times, 1,000,001 times. It's just how it is.
Do you think it sends the wrong message when people are getting promoted? Do you think that it's in some way hurting the sport or the art?
I don't know. I'm sure it is in some ways. If anything, it would hurt the person who's doing the promoting. The way I would see it, it's like if it's the same kind of thing that jiu-jitsu guys were saying in the 90s. It's like about like all these other arts, It's like you're going to train all these years and then not know what the fuck you're doing, It's like, me myself, like it took me 16 years to get a black belt.
Yeah.
And that's a long time, And I was at brown belt forever, man. And I was in every belt forever. And I did it old school style where there wasn't no like ceremony. There wasn't no shit. It's just like whenever they felt like you were good enough or ready enough, they handed you the belt. The only ceremony I ever got a belt in was at my black belt. And that was only because my instructor made a big deal about me going to this one promotion. And I was just like, all right, I'll go. But I honestly, at that point, I think by the time I was like purple belt, I stopped giving a fuck about the belts,
Yeah.
Just because at that point, once I was in purple, I knew I was in this shit for life. And I wanted to do this until I was an old man. So however long it took for me to get to whatever it was, I was okay with it. And I wasn't going to become obsessed about, of course, we all do. We all do. We all think about it like, oh man, when it's going to happen, when's going to happen, when's going to happen, when's going to happen. But you can't let that overcome your progress, I think, and where you are as a jiu-jitsu practitioner in the moment.
So I guess here's kind of like a counter thought to, what we were talking about, right? So let's say, I don't know, who'd be a super famous, let's say Justin Bieber decided to buy a black belt from somebody. Like somebody was willing to sell Justin Bieber a BJJ black belt and signed off on it and put their stamp of approval, and it was somebody whose name carried some respect. I think the fact that such a visible human being had the black belt, I mean, yes, obviously a lot of people would question whether or not that was legitimate, but it would draw so many eyes to the sport, and it would probably or possibly bring more people to the sport. So I guess that's a potential benefit.
Yeah, and there has been instructors that, I mean, that accusation has been, put upon, where they say, that person hasn't even rolled and they're just famous and you just gave them this belt. And obviously, for whatever reasons, it's probably generating more business for their academy, I mean, that I think it falls on the instructor, I think, at the end of the day, because I mean, if you're just handing out belts and watering down the art, it's going to come and bite you in the ass. And it's already, even when at the academy where I was at, when the brothers were doing their whole online thing and the blue belt scandal came out, they had to backtrack about the shit, because they realized certain things about it, So I think at the end of the day, it's like it is important that, if Bieber buys a black belt, but Bieber walks into some gym and some two-stripe blue belt just wipes his. I mean, sure, I'm sure, I mean, maybe this blue belt was a world champion. I don't know, whatever. But you know what I'm saying, right? Like, if you can't demonstrate the certain amount of proficiency in the art with live resistance, then what the fuck are you doing?
I guess that the alternative argument to that is, it's the old, if you don't put yourself in that situation, it's never going to be a problem. I mean, if somebody's never rolled before and they buy a BJJ black belt after a certain number of years of taking private lessons from somebody, nobody's going to know any better unless they actually show up and roll.
I mean, and that's the thing, though. It's like, I don't even know how to, because that's the thing. It's like, if you don't ever roll, then what are you doing? How are you practicing the techniques, completely, because there is that aspect of jiu-jitsu where that makes judo and jiu-jitsu so special is the practice of it against somebody who's resisting, and even in my blue belt days, like, dude, everybody understands the anxiety of going into a room with a bunch of it feels like a Shark Tank, man. And I've been there before, getting hurt, rolling to the point of throwing up and just being so weak, getting completely manhandled by like higher belts, like them just destroying me, just for their pleasure. I think it's part of the experience that the trial by fire you have to go as a practitioner of jiu-jitsu. And if you miss that, it's almost the same way as kind of like people who study music or do music but don't get a certain aspect of the education. You completely just missed out on it. So it's like you're not ever going to be well-rounded,
Yeah, for sure, man. I agree with you. I'm just kind of throwing some devil's advocate shit your way. We got another We got another question from Richard. Now, Richard's the only one in here asking questions. If you're watching and you want to ask anything, I mean, you got a freaking rock star here in Ulises Bella. He's a two-time Grammy-winning musician, one of the best Latin fusion guys on the planet. Richard is asking, hold on. Ulises, would you rather teach music for $400,000 per year or jujitsu for $200,000 a year to high school students?
To high school students. Oh, I mean, if it's $400,000, yeah, I'll teach music, no doubt.
Yeah. That's kind of my answer. I figure if it's, I mean, as long as I'm still allowed to do jujitsu, as long as I'm not being forced to choose between the two, fuck it.
Yeah. I'm gonna go where the dough is, my man.
Exactly.
Now,
easy.
Now, here's the thing: if I can do both, then I'm in 6, baby, and we're all winning. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the thing with jiu-jitsu too is that in any moments where I've ever been teaching or whatever, I've never charged. I've never been like, like people who've come and train and like there's been more than a couple people who here at the Ghetto Dojo where we were like this was their first time practicing or trying out jiu-jitsu. And my whole thing was just like, hey man, just bring me a 6-pack or buy me a burrito or some shit, and we'll call it a day. Like I'm not trying to, represent the art like where I feel like I gotta charge you, like that. It's not a formal gym, it's not a formal setting, but it's interesting. More than a couple people who have gotten introduced to jiu-jitsu here ended up getting real serious with it and obviously continue training.
That's awesome. Richard, you're allowed to ask any questions you want, man. I mean, if you're the only one asking questions. But yeah, he asked if we've grappled before, how do we know each other? We have never actually gotten to meet each other in person, but
no, we haven't.
But it's gonna happen one of these days. I'm gonna be out in California for a tournament, or Ulises is gonna be on tour somewhere. I'd love to see your band live. I hope you guys come back to Cleveland sometime.
And honestly, from watching your videos, man, I would love to get a session with you in where you teach me some of the stuff you've been doing, man. It's really, really great shit.
Thank you. No, it's a pleasure. So are there any jiu-jitsu guys you've been watching? Any tournaments you've been watching? Have you been watching any of the EBIs? Do you tune in for that stuff?
Yeah. Well, thankfully, I've always had a relationship with the Datsu Sara crew. Chris from Datsu Sara, he's one of the main sponsors for the Eddie Bravo stuff. So I've been able to see tons of the EBIs. I saw more than a couple of the Metamorphoses when they were really, really popping. And, some tournaments through the years. Unfortunately, a lot of the tournaments are on the weekends. So that's the days I work. So I whenever I can go, I try to.
When you say you work, do you have a day job too?
No. More like on the weekends, I'm usually the way we tour is usually we leave Thursdays and we'll fly to a certain part of the country or the world, and then we either rent vans or rent SUVs, and we'll kind of do like a weekend run, like we'll hit it really hard in a certain section of the country, and then we usually fly back around Monday.
Okay. That's actually a super interesting way to tour, because I feel like rather than making the tour your lifestyle, the tour becomes a job where it's like, you have a few days you're touring and then you're home. And then a few days you're touring and then you're home. Whereas a lot of bands do like an extensive tour. They're traveling around a country or around a region.
Right. I think, well, we in the past, we have toured like that, where we would be out 8 to 9 months out of the year, man. We were touring hard. And the thing with that kind of touring is that usually when it makes sense, that type of touring is when you're either supporting a really big act, or unless you're like a major headliner yourself, but either you're supporting a big headline tour or you're an established tour of some sort, because you got to think nowadays the overheads are ridiculous. The bus, the hotels, the crew, all these things cost money. So at this point, as a band, we're really streamlined. We have like 6 members in the band. We usually tour with a tour manager slash sound guy slash tour guy. We set up all our own shit. We break down all our own shit. We run our sound checks. We do it all. And most of the time we're true to our room, so we're lean and mean, man. But we've toured the complete opposite, where it's like buses, every day, like just going to the catering of these big tours, and just like it being almost like a Roman orgy vibe.
Yeah. What's the biggest tour you've been on?
There's been a couple of them. 2 national tours with Carlos Santana, right when he was kind of blowing up with Supernatural. We're probably big stadium tour. We did a small stadium tour with Dave Matthews, which was nuts. It was us, Dave Matthews, and Ben Harper. I mean, the guy was selling out giant stadiums 3 nights in a fucking row. I mean, it doesn't get bigger than that. You know what I mean? And whether you like him or not, that's the thing. It's like, and Dave is a super nice guy. Those I would say were the 2 kind of bigger ones. We have done other tours. I mean, we've done Lenny Kravitz. We did the Warp Tour, which isn't necessarily like when we did it, it wasn't a fancy tour at all, but it's a major one. It was a major one, and yeah, I would say those were the kind of the big ones.
That's awesome, man. It's I'm very curious about the Dave Matthews tour. If they were, I know that that Dave Matthews did a song with Jurassic 5, and I know that you guys had a. Are you getting any feedback on your end?
No, but I'm hearing like crackles when you talk.
Okay, hold on. Let me try something. Are you better now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, actually, it's funny. You're much louder now that I unplugged the headphones. Are you still getting crackles?
A little bit.
Okay. So, when you guys toured with Dave Matthews, did they play that song, that Jurassic 5 song? Was Charlie Tuna with your band at that point?
No, when we toured with them, that was before they had ever written the song.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Are there any tour packages that you would want to see put together that, a dream tour package for you? Like a band you really want to tour with now?
Honestly, it sucks because we were actually planning this tour for the end of this year, so it's probably not going to happen. But there was plans of us touring with the band War, and if you know who the band War is they're very influential soul, R&B, funk group from the 70s, and we had done a couple shows with them, and we clicked great with that band, and it was really, really fun. And we were planning a tour with War and us, and I think there was going to be another band that was going to be in the making. But as far as bands, bands out there that are touring, I'm kind of open nowadays. I like when there's all kinds of different bands on a particular bill.
Yeah, me too.
Festivals like Glastonbury, festivals like Fuji Rock, even Coachella, were more so like Glastonbury though, where it feels really eclectic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that kind of stuff too. So we got another question from Richard Stewart. He said, "Have the higher belts who used to push Ulises around, are they still around? Like when you said you were a purple belt."
I think they're from, so basically like when I was a purple belt, are they still around? Like that kind of a question?
Like, okay, so a great example for me. Back when I was a white belt, there was this black belt that used to come around. His name is Joe Langford. He might tune into this at some point this evening. Joe's a really good friend of mine. And I was a white belt, and he'd come around and he'd always fucking tool me. Like he would beat me up real bad, but he was super nice about it. And over the years, I slowly kind of caught up to him. Like he's still fucking amazing, but I'm considerably better than I was back then. So now I can give Joe some trouble, and we still roll and we have a lot of fun. Do you have anybody like that used to fuck you up back when you were a purple belt that's still around that you train with?
Well, the guy that introduced me to jiu-jitsu, Raka, I mean, he was already a blue belt, and he was getting me in all kinds of shit. And unfortunately, with him is that he didn't have the I guess the time because he had kids and all this other stuff to like not be able to train as much. So at a certain point, I was able to train a lot. And so inevitably you end up lapping people, that just happens for sure.
Yeah, some people. I mean, some people still keep up with it and they're still fucking tough.
Oh yeah, you don't ever want to fuck with them for sure. Right.
Yeah, I'd love to get Rock on here sometime. Another question from Richard. Richard's taking full advantage of this thing. Other people should too. Have you ever had to use jiu-jitsu in a real life setting, like on stage or at a show or after the show or something?
Only a couple times, really. And like one time, one guy was so wilding out on me that I did that thing where I just turned him around real quick and I cracked him down by kicking the back of the knee, and I got him in a rear naked real fast. And immediately that drunk energy was gone. Besides that, there's been a couple times just where it's kind of just like it's almost gets to that point where it's going to get really fucking ugly and it stops. The one thing for sure though is that I think with jiu-jitsu is that it gives you that confidence that if it does turn to violence, that at least you have some sort of a game plan and some sort of a strategy to possibly either fuck someone up really, really bad or at least just control them, And that's what I love about jiu-jitsu. It's like, it's not going to just, the amount of force and the amount of intensity of the force is kind of up to you. And because of that, I think I can tour it. There's been places where I'm walking around where people are like, don't go down there and some crazy shit happens. But in me, I have a certain amount of confidence where it's like, unless they're pulling out a knife or a gun, I'm good,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I also feel like jiu-jitsu, that confidence, it exudes itself. Like,
totally.
People probably feel that when you're around. They're like, don't mess with this guy. This guy's not the one.
Well, and I'm already kind of a tall dude. I'm like 6'2", 200 something pounds, It's like most of the people are trying to not fuck with the biggest dude, So if somebody does fuck with me, they're probably way bigger than me, So thankfully I haven't been able to I haven't gotten to a point where I had to like really fuck somebody up, but nor do I want to get it ever to that point, honestly. But I'm glad that if the option goes there and if it gets that crazy, that I can defend myself and my loved ones,
For sure, man. Do you think that rolling or training with somebody bigger is easier, or somebody that's much smaller?
Rolling with somebody that's bigger or is easier?
Let me explain. Let me kind of shape my question. So, like, some of my most challenging rolls for me are with guys that are much smaller but are equally strong. Whereas
I see what you're saying.
guys that are much bigger than me, I actually have an easier time with. I actually have an easier time manipulating them. Do you have that, Dick? Do you find that?
What I find personally is the guys that are tough for me are, because I obviously being a bigger dude, I'm kind of a more of a like, I try to melt on you like gravy. Like I try to think about it like cheese. Like I'm just gonna try to melt on you and try to get the shit, you know, like that's my game, you know.
I actually use an analogy.
Um, the guys I have the hardest time with are the super flexible but strong guys. The guys that can put their legs all the way like by their ears, and it's almost nearly impossible to pass their fucking guards. Like those dudes, for whatever reason, I find it the most frustrating. Like the super flexible but strong guys.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny that you described your game like that. I actually have an analogy that I give people. I tell them that I like to imagine them a bowl of stinky cheese just kind of melting on the person. There's nothing they can do about it. It smells terrible and it's awful. And
Yes.
I like that analogy, and I've used it before, and you're the only other person I've heard use that analogy.
That's funny. Yeah, it's funny because one of my Japanese friends called me the bean smasher. Because it's like, yeah, I'm a beaner and I'm smashing.
Oh, I get it. Okay, I was like, the beans. Are you meat cutting through his guard really hard? Like, is that what's happening?
No, just like because the Mexican thing. You refry the beans, you have to smash them.
Of course.
But yeah, that was his thing, and I always think about it as cheese or gravy. Like once I'm try to get either side control or something like that, I try to position my weight in certain parts of your body where it just makes it miserable for you, but makes it comfortable for me.
Yeah, yeah. I find that I have to make myself uncomfortable on top. Like, I almost have to like try to break my own ribs over your ribs, type of thing.
Mm, 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 mm.
We got
Nice.
a question from Bill Murphy. He asks, do you think that Emil Fisher could learn to salsa dance, or do you think his lack of rhythm and lack of pelvic dexterity would ruin the experience for other people on the dance floor? Number one, Bill, I will have you know that I got Latin blood in these veins. My mother's Venezuelan, so fuck you. Number two, I've taken salsa classes. So, come on. Sorry. I had to address that. I had to address that.
Emil, I completely agree with you. I'm positive you can get good at salsa, and I'm especially with jiu-jitsu. It's all about the hips, unless you're like one of those guys that don't like to. But it's usually about the hips, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, not enough jiu-jitsu guys dance. It's sad, but I encourage everybody to dance, whether you suck at it or not. But no, for sure. I believe it. You can get good at salsa dancing. Fuck yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying I am good at it, but
no, but you can get good at it. And here's the thing, Emil. I don't know if you're single or not, but if you're a badass like that, huh?
I'm married.
Okay, then never mind. But for the guys out there, if you can get your dance on, especially salsa, and you do jiu-jitsu, I mean, you're gonna be beating them off with a stick, man. It's a wrap, homie. Especially if you got style and you're like, like twirling them around, doing shit. Like, dude, you're winning.
For sure, man. For sure. So, have you been watching? Did you watch the UFC event this past Saturday?
Unfortunately, I missed it.
Oh.
But I heard it was really good. But I missed it.
Do you think that concerts are going to be opening back up soon too?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know. I hope so. There's people who talk about like nothing at that level is going to happen until a vaccine. But I've also heard, at this point, the only thing I can do is adapt and make things happen for myself now. When they say it's cool to have shows, I'm ready. I'll play a shitty club right now, like a drop of a hat, like no bathroom in there, shitty sound system, but just to have that rush of being able to play in front of people, I'm raring to go. You know what I mean? But I'm at the mercy of just the industry and just the way things are. You know what I mean? And I feel the only thing I can do, regardless of all the friends I have and all their conspiracy theories, is that I just have to deal with my reality at this moment, and how am I going to make ends meet, and how am I going to be an artist still and a musician still. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to think outside of the box. I'm trying to think about streaming. I'm trying to think about connecting with people on Patreon. I'm thinking about whether or not that's going to happen with our kids' music. People were even talking about, like, what if we have a drive-in concert,
Hmm.
stuff like that, where people could go in and just kick it in their car, get fucking wasted in there, and we're just on the stage and the sound kind of comes through all around.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking more about when they finally say, "Hey, everybody, we can have shows." Fuck yes, awesome, let's do it. Until then, I'm not gonna like wallow in what I can't do. Basically, I got to figure out what I can do.
Yeah. I mean, the live streaming thing, it's interesting. There's some guys that have been doing it for a while, like specifically, I know I've had Herman Lee on here from Dragon Force and Matt Heafy from Trivium. Both those guys have been streaming for a long time, and they use uh, I know Matt uses a program called Twitch. I know he's done pretty well with
Mm-hmm.
that, kind of recording his daily session. It's just not the same as live music. Live music just has a kind of vibe to it.
No, no way, and it never will be. And honestly, that's our one saving grace as musicians, and musicians that are good live bands. You know, that's our one thing, man. Is the one thing they can't put in a bottle and sell. Like, you can't watch a festival. You're not gonna go see a band like like what, Dragon Force or Judas Priest or Slayer or any of these bands in your living room and feel the same way than you being there right in front of them. It'll never replicate that. So that's our saving grace, is that want for human beings to be in front of there and feel that energy of everybody being in the crowd.
Of all the bands that you've seen or played with, was there any one whose energy stuck out to you?
Yeah, more than a few. One that comes to mind just off the bat is Toots from Toots and the Maytals, which is a very famous Jamaican artist and band. He has that really famous song, 5446 is my number. If you don't know who I'm talking about, you've heard his music. But Toots and the Maytals, Toots is like 80 something, and the guy still performs with incredible energy. So a guy like that, where I'm like, wow, you know, you're older than all these bands, but yet you're putting out energy that bands half your age. That's always impressive to me.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, it's for me, it's always there's always these bands that come out and like they feel like they got something to prove, or you feel like they got something to prove when they get out there. That it's those bands that really have amazing energy for me, at least.
Yeah.
You know, like the fuckers that are going out there running around the stage. It's almost like, what is happening?
Right.
Are there any locales that you haven't gotten to play that you particularly want to go to? Like anything, any venues that you've never gotten to play that it's like, I want to play this place?
As far as the States is concerned, we've pretty much played almost every cool venue, I would say, in the States. Places like Red Rocks in Colorado,
Yeah.
which is like one of the most gorgeous venues in the world. The Gorge in Washington. Um, real famous clubs in New York. We've done them all the Hollywood Bowl, you name it here in LA. At this point, it's more about countries that we've never played at, and we have visited over, close to 50 something countries in our careers. But, there's certain countries that we haven't been to yet. Like we've never played Manila, the Philippines. We've never played Moscow, Russia, or the Ukraine, Kiev. There's certain Scandinavian countries we've never been to, like Norway. Would be really cool to go to Oslo, but we have, and also some countries in the middle of Africa we haven't been to that would be kind of cool. Go to Nairobi or something like that.
Yeah.
But we've been to every single continent in this world, and gotten to see, a lot of different music, man.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So you said you've been to 50 different countries. I'm assuming you've probably played considerably more venues. Is there any crowd that you feel was like legit the craziest crowd you played for?
Oh yeah. Well, Mexico City off the bat, pretty crazy crowd. If they turn on you, it's fucking pretty fucked up. One time we had this experience where we were in Mongolia, bro. We were in Mongolia. We were cultural ambassadors, and we were playing a free show in the middle of the main square, with a huge statue of Genghis Khan, and we were really hyped, man. We were really hyped about this show. Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, bro. Like, tough as fuck people there, like super tough. Like, I don't know if you know about Mongolia and wrestling and judo. They're super tough. So we're having a good time, and this is during the era of MySpace. Yes, MySpace era. And when we put as a band that we were in Ulaanbaatar, the default setting on the MySpace page said that we were in China. So all of a sudden, we touched this huge historical nerve with the people of Mongolia, who have this historical pretty much hatred of Chinese. And we got death threats, bro. We were getting like, how dare you motherfuckers say you're in China? Like, we're like, dude, we didn't say it was like a fucking default thing. We know we're in Mongolia, duh. Like, people were like basically saying, like, if you guys play, we're gonna come out there and fuck you up. And we were basically almost shitting our pants. We had to write this whole thing out, apologizing and saying this thing, but we still had all these death threats and like threats of violence. So we ended up playing the show, and there was like 15,000 people there, and we ended up winning over the crowd, which for me was like a huge victory, because at a certain point I thought, like, they're gonna fucking tear us apart. There's been plenty of times where, like, even in Kathmandu, when we played Kathmandu, the stage was almost 100 feet away from where the crowd was.
Yeah.
And I remember asking the guy, I was like, hey man, why is the crowd so far away from the stage, man? And the guy was just like, straight up, he's like, well, put it to you like this. If the crowd doesn't like your music, or if there's too many technical difficulties, they'll just start throwing bottles and rocks at you guys. And I was like, and so it being 100 feet away, at least you can kind of see it coming if they start throwing them at you.
Yeah.
So we've had plenty of experiences like that, for sure.
Have you ever had a crowd really fucking hate you?
Oh yeah, for sure. And when we opened up for the Offspring in Philadelphia, one of the guys like dedicated a song to this particular political prisoner that was over there. That was like a big deal in Philadelphia, and the whole fucking crowd basically turned on us. The security too, everybody turned on us. It was crazy shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you guys are a political band. Like, you do sing quite a bit about politics. Do you ever look back on something that you guys stood for in the past and go, we weren't exactly?
Say again for that last part of the question.
Do you ever look back on something that you guys stood for and, be like, we were right, we were wrong on this one.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing with being any kind of politics or any kind of
Yeah,
political statement is that, look, and here's a concept that I think that sometimes it's hard to understand in the climate that we're in. It's like, yes, we have the free speech, but guess what? There's consequences to this free speech. And guess what? If you really believe in that shit, you're going to take that shit, whether it's good or whether it's bad. And we've had moments where we stuck to our guns for something or other, and it ended up not working out for us, but we had to accept the consequences of the speech, of whatever the fuck we said. But one thing that did come to mind is that we were supposed to go on a tour with the Roots, which is amazing, right? And
yeah.
I think there was two other bands, but one of the guys in the band, because it was sponsored by a tobacco company, he was really bumming out on it, and he didn't want to do it, and we ended up not doing it. But looking back on it now, with the way things is, because you got to think about it like this, Emil. When we first started, what was defined as what it means to be a sellout was completely different from what it means nowadays, or if
Right.
even the concept itself. Back in the day, if you had anything to do with certain advertising or certain companies or whatever, people were screaming sellout. Nowadays, it's like that's the only job, that's the only like things that sometimes bring in money is like your song gets licensed for a commercial or something like that. So it's like at this point it's survival, man. It's like it doesn't matter as much, I think, nowadays.
Yeah. What's the craziest shit your guys' stuff has ever been licensed for?
The craziest shit that we've ever been licensed for, as far as profitability or just craziness.
So I guess it's a two-part question. As like, what's the biggest thing that you've ever seen your music on? That's number one. Number two, what's the most unexpected thing you've ever seen your music on?
I would say one of the bigger ones is that Apple used us in one of their commercials. I think it was for one of the iPod commercials.
I
I don't
remember
know
that.
which generation. I don't remember. But man, that commercial aired internationally, and I remember even in Osaka, Japan, this one woman came up to the show just because she saw that commercial. It's
That's
like,
awesome.
whoa, the power of the media, I guess, and just the power of TV and advertising.
Yeah.
Um, um, as far as like what I never thought, I would say we did a bunch of music for kids shows and the public broadcasting and stuff like that. The same guys who did Sesame Street and shit like that. And we did a bunch of songs like about math and kid subjects basically.
Yeah.
And I never thought I was in my college days that it would get to that where we were like all of a sudden writing music for that, and also video games. That's another one. I never thought I would compose music for video games, so we got that opportunity too, so that was super cool.
Yeah, that is awesome, man. It's funny because like your style of music reminds me of a lot of these like '90s after school specials, just like the kind of music they'd have, like you know, to be hip. It's funny because it kind of came back around. Now it really is hip. Like it's awesome stuff. You guys did the music. You guys did some music with, sorry, Gabriel Iglesias.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Fluffy was a fan from way back, and then when we found out that he dug us, we were like all about it. And we started first with being the house band for his Stand Up Revolution show. We did like I want to say 3 or 4 seasons of that, and then there was a moment that we were actually on the road with him. He was taking us out. We were kind of like the band before all the comics came out, which is really really fun. That's another guy who's filling up stadiums, man, and he's just one guy,
Yeah.
and we were lucky enough to be given the opportunity to compose the theme song for his show Mr. Iglesias on Netflix.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, just the list of stuff you guys have gotten to do, like you were in the movie Never Been Kissed. Like, what the fuck? you know, and you guys were
Yeah,
in
I
Sex
mean
and the City. Like,
that one that was some crazy shit in this sense, that because when we first started, Emil, we were doing residencies at these particular Hollywood clubs. The residency is that, well, you get a day and you're there every week, basically, like your
mhm.
Thursday nights. And there was this one club in particular called the Opium Den, where we were basically selling out every Thursday, and it became a buzz thing. And it was very common to see celebrities there, people like Selma Hayek, actors. I remember Bill Maher with a super hot black chick trying to get in, and he couldn't get in. He was getting really mad at the door guy. And here I am, just like this, you know, 20-something-year-old knucklehead, like tripping out, like, oh man, these guys are trying to get in. So from that buzz, Drew Barrymore asked us to be in that movie. And for the longest time, Emil, I could go to any fucking truck stop in this country, in the middle of this country, and they would be like, who the fuck are you guys? And it'd be like, Ozomatli. And it'd be like, never heard of you. And I'd be like, well, we were the band in Never Been Kissed when she eats a pot brownie, yo. And it immediately it would be like, oh, you guys are that. Okay, so that was our little claim to fame for that era.
Yeah, I mean, it's. How did you guys? At what point did you guys go from just being a house band to being a household name? Like, what was the process of that growth?
I don't know if we're necessarily completely a household name in certain senses, because in certain ways, Ozo Motley never completely had that one super commercial hit that, like, gave us that stamp. But we did ride on our reputation of being a really good live band. And so when people were always be like, Ozo Motley, oh, they're a great live band, you'll love it, you'll have fun. And again, going back to that idea of, like, you can't put this shit in a bottle. You can't put a festival or a great show in a bottle. And I think that's one of the things that completely carried us as far as our a name is concerned. It was our reputation to be able to deliver a great live show that not only was good music, but incorporated the audience.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. Uh, One other question for you. You had mentioned earlier that you like to buy records, that you like to buy albums because you want to support the bands that you love and you want to support music. That's kind of it's kind of the way, and it's kind of going the way of the past now. Like, you don't see a lot of people with that kind of ethos. Like, most people are fine listening to stuff on Spotify, or even worse yet, illegally downloading music. Do you think that physical music is going to die out soon? And do you think that it's damaging the music industry?
I don't know if, well, buying physical music is dead already. I mean, true, they're Luddites like myself and other collectors who are still into buying music and buying the physical thing. Like, all right, this is the record. I got the record, whatever. It's in my hands. Um, but I think for the most part, nowadays, music has turned into basically a promotional device to try to get the audience or the people to buy something else, whether it's a shirt at the show or going to the show.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in some ways, that's what kind of music has come to. Sure, you can still get that one song that either gets licensed or completely blows up on some viral shit. Yes, that could still happen. But the days of brick and mortar stores, there's less and less record stores. Even though, I mean, sure, even with all that being said, um, you'll get spikes in people buying vinyl still. Like people want to buy that. They like the ritual of it. They like the way it sounds. The social aspect of sharing music like that, which I appreciate, and I'm glad that that's still kind of around. But like when you can't compete with free. If people are going to be able to download your music for free, I mean, that's just the reality of how music is distributed and consumed nowadays, and that's just how it is. And honestly, at this point, if people want to download Ozomatli music, go ahead, do it. Just if you ever see us come to your town, go check out the show. Go maybe buy a sticker, maybe buy a shirt at the show. Go to our website, because that's what it's kind of come down to as far as music is concerned, I think.
Yeah, I try to buy a band shirt from any band that I really listen to more than once. Like if I listen to your shit more than
Right.
once and I go see you live, I am I'm gonna buy a shirt from you. We got Bill Murphy here in the comments asking all sorts of shit. I gotta get him on here. He's asking. He's saying, "What's the best doing it music of all time?"
Ooh, that's a good question. All right. Well, I don't know about the best ones of all time, but I can tell you personal ones, right? Um, Sade. That's a good one. Kind of Blue, Miles Davis. You're gonna get fucked. Um, there's a classic one that people kind of slept on through the ages, which is Bolero by Ravel. I don't know if you know that one. That the whole point
Yes,
of that
yes, yes. I know that
that
song.
it starts from
Really?
nothing and then ends in this huge climax. That's a classic one. If you can nut by the end of Bolero, you're the man or the woman, whatever's. Or if you can nut at the peak, you're good. Kind of Blue, Sade, Massive Attack. That's a good one too. Massive Attack's I forgot which album, but there's a couple of them that are good baby making music. And of course, you got your classics like Isaac Hayes, Marvin Gaye. Those will always work out for you too.
I mean, I'm a Nine Inch Nails kind of guy, so you can't really go
I
wrong with that.
respect that. I respect that, but when I think about Nine Inch Nails, I think we're taking it up a level, right? If we're listening to Nine Inch Nails or Skinny Puppy or Godflesh, the fucking is going to be furious and angry.
I'm an angry kind of guy. What can I say? We got another question from Bill Murphy because Bill Murphy's, there's a funny story. Bill Murphy is the instructor and mentor of the last man to beat me in a professional match, and I've become friends with that guy and thus have become friends with his mentor and instructor. Bill's asking, was Selma Hayek hotter as Frida with the eyebrows or in Dusk Till Dawn with Snake? I don't fully understand the
Oh,
question.
Dusk Till Dawn. I mean, come on. And live, she no, she is super hot for sure, no doubt.
Yeah. Selma Hayek or J-Lo?
As a person, I'll say Selma. Just because J Lo shined us really fucking hard once, and I was just like, man, whatever's with her.
What happened? Tell me. I got to hear this now.
Okay, we were backstage at this event in Washington D.C. where basically every luminary, every politician of like the Latin thing was over there. Like the
Okay.
Queen of Spain was even at the party. I remember I met that really famous chef for the first time there, Jose Andres there. Um, anyways, we had played a show with Mark Anthony before in LA and we opened up for Mark Anthony. So we were backstage and we ran into Mark Anthony and he was really happy to see us. He was like, Ozomatli, what's up, guys? What's up? So he's all cheesy and we're cheesy and we're having a good time just like seeing him again and being happy that he even remembered us. And
Yeah.
J-Lo was behind him rolling her fucking eyes and basically kind of like, let's get the fuck out of here. Why are you even saying hi to these cretins? So that was
Oh
the vibe.
man.
So, ever since then, I was kind of like whatever's with J-Lo, I mean, it's not like I was a big fan anyway, but
Yeah, I know. That's a good story. It kind of, fuck that. Fuck that. Let people be happy and friendly with each other.
Oh, all day. And, and that's the thing. It's interesting sometimes being a musician in a band all these years and getting to meet some of my heroes and then getting to be like, oh, man, that person is really, really fucking cool. Or being like, oh, my God, that person is a fucking straight asshole. It's interesting, how it all goes down sometimes.
It's the same with jiu-jitsu.
Totally. Completely.
Was there anybody that you met in jiu-jitsu that was a lot cooler in person than you thought they would be?
Chris Hodder for sure is one guy. When I first, met him, I mean, obviously being one of the Dirty Dozen guys, you're like, man, this guy's for reals. But his energy and his love of music and certain things he's into, and his kind of his philosophies and the way he's not really, I guess his political views in certain ways, like where it's interesting how he rides the line and how he kind of thinks for himself in a certain ways. I super dug Chris. The first time meeting Elio Gracie, he told me to come over and I was like, what's up? And he's like, dude, your girlfriend's kind of hot. I had this really hot girlfriend at the time, and he was just like kind of giving me props, like, yo, man, you scored one, homie.
That's awesome. Did you ever get to train with Elio?
I took a couple seminars and got to be around him a little bit. Obviously there's guys that really were hanging out with him a lot, but one of my coolest memories too is that he was demonstrating this funky like side control choke from the bottom, where you basically kind of use your leg and you grab the collar and you use your leg while the guy's kind of on your side, but his arm has to be in a certain position. It's kind of like a crazy choke.
Is it a buggy choke? Is it a buggy choke?
I'm not sure. It's hard to explain from like where I'm sitting, but he wanted to demonstrate it on somebody, and I was like, me, please. I want to feel your strength, old man, like in my head. That's what I was thinking. Like, I want to feel how strong you really are. And yeah, no, he totally fucking laid it on me, and it was great, like just what an inspiration, a guy like that, like still in so old and still enthusiastic about jiu-jitsu,
Yeah. That's awesome, man. So yeah, it's you've gotten to train with some really cool people. You got to meet some really cool people. Well, we're at about the hour and a half mark, and I wanted to keep this at about an hour and a half. I really appreciate you coming on, Ulises. It was a real pleasure to have you on here and to get to chat with you and get to hear some of your stories. Was there anything else that you wanted to leave the audience with? We still have like 5 people watching, which is pretty good for this long in.
I guess thank you very much for having me on your show, Emil. I appreciate the prior interviews that you did for me, for us, or for Jiu-Jitsu Times, and having me on your show. I really appreciate that. I appreciate all the people who've been asking questions, and hopefully once all this bullshit blows over, we can train again as a community and support each other as a community. And the other thing too is that definitely all the gym owners and academy owners who've been obviously just like myself, the business is down the tubes, but once hopefully all this opens up, we can support each other and be back on the mats and putting some money into the system,
Yeah, for sure, man. I agree 100%. So before we cut the feed, I did want to go through the schedule for this week because we got some pretty good guests coming up here. Tomorrow evening at 6 p.m., these are all Eastern time, 6 p.m., I've got David Aguzzi, the owner of Grappling Industries. Thursday evening at, I believe it's also 6 p.m. Eastern, I've got Nikki Sullivan, who is an elite female competitor. Friday evening, I've got Lance King, the former singer of Avian, Balance of Power, and Pyramaze, and the owner of Nightmare Records. He's coming on. He's also a James Labrie lookalike, which I think is very funny. I like making fun of him for. Then Saturday, this upcoming Saturday, I've got, who did I say I got Saturday? Sorry. This thing is freezing on me. Saturday, I got somebody awesome. Sunday, I've got Gokor Chevekian.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Gokor. Saturday, I've got Silver Fox, who, in my opinion, is the happiest man in jiu-jitsu.
Well, that's amazing.
It's a good lineup, right?
No, that's great. That's a good thing.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you.
Happy people in jiu-jitsu, man.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I'm saying. Like, I always talk to him like, you're good. He's a very good instructor, but his happiness is more important to me. It's more important to me than his technique. He's got good technique, but he's just so happy. And it's infectious. It's like,
that's why I appreciate you, bro, because, in all your posters and all the walkouts and all that shit, you don't take yourself like fucking like this is the Kumite, like blood sport, like you have fun with it, and that reflects in everything, and I like that. I appreciate that.
I appreciate that. That means a lot to me, Ulises. Hey, you have a great night.
Yeah, man.
Thank you so much for joining. Stay on after. I wanted to tell you something.
Okay.